Hello, everyone. This is Eric with Chris at potstocks.com. Today, we're here with Giadha DeCarcer of New Frontier Financial to discuss the current state of the market and their industry studies. Their website is www.frontierfinancials.com. Giadha, thank you very much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure is mine, Eric. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to jump into some opening questions. The first one, just tell us a little bit about New Frontier Financial's current place in the cannabis market, its focus, and its inherent value.
Absolutely. New Frontier is the big data shop in the cannabis space today. We collect, aggregate, and make big data available and searchable to operators, investors, and legislators so they can make better, more educated decisions into this very attractive and blooming industry.
Excellent, excellent. With the entire legal cannabis market in mind, what benefit does the information available at New Frontier Financial have for businesses, potential investors, any interested party?
Absolutely. Well, let me give you a couple of examples. There's right now in Colorado, we have seen quite an increase in the competitive pricing and competitive environment for operators. Operators are becoming more and more sophisticated, and they need to understand how they may remain competitive and how to best price their products, whether it is on the wholesale side or the retail side. What New Frontier does is we provide them the data and look into the greater industry so that they can continue to make the best decisions associated with their actual location. We provide benchmark and aggregated macro level as well as micro level down to the zip code data that they can then use, again, to make better decisions. On the investor side, what we have seen in the past is a lot of qualitative data expressing that the cannabis industry is growing and is very large. That's fantastic. But we're at the point where the investment volume is so large, the investors coming in are so sophisticated that they need a little more visibility into what the potential return on investment may be, as well as sort of what are the verticals that are more promising, or even maybe the geographic areas that are more promising.
Excellent.
Last but not
Sorry about that. No, I just wanted to give Chris an opportunity to jump in if he had any ideas. So
Yeah, so I've read all the reports, and I have to commend you guys because I've read similar big data crunches on the marijuana industry, and you guys do the best about distilling it and presenting it in a way that's like visually appealing, and it makes sense just reading it. And there's stuff in there that I wouldn't have necessarily thought I thought was counterintuitive from what I had just assumed about like the qualitative data, and it was actually like a breath of fresh air, like reading some of how you broke this down, because there were decisions that maybe I would have made as an investor differently than I would have before reading that. So I just have to commend you guys. I mean, they're really good, and they're good on different levels too, like you're saying, the macro and the micro for investors and for operators. So that's great.
Glad to hear that.
Excellent. Just to move forward a little bit, focusing on a little bit what we just touched there, a big value to the reports is that you are very clearly delineating between the medical and recreational markets, which isn't a big distinction for investors because there are different markets that exist, particularly with recreational rollout being kind of a rocky road at the moment, but it is something that's moving through the country. Without giving too much away, what is the inherent value of having two different data streams available for those things for potential investors? And Chris, please, touch on that as well.
So there's a lot of discussion right now going on in terms of what will happen with the recreational vertical, the recreational portion of the cannabis market coming online and becoming so attractive. And folks are also talking a lot about the fact that the margins associated with recreational use are greater. So some of the questions that we are currently looking to answer is how will it impact the overall industry once we see more states like Colorado legalizing adult use marijuana. One of the first things that we at least see based on the data is that no, we do not think that the recreational portion of the market will take over the medical. Those two verticals, for lack of a better term, will continue to coexist, especially as there is more collaboration between the pharmaceutical and cultivation side, or operations, retail and cultivation side of the industry. There's a lot that we yet don't know about this plan, but we know enough to know that the medical applications are extremely important. And once big pharma comes in, it is quite unlikely that we'll see a significant decrease in that portion of the industry.
Cool. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, and in the reports again, the delineation between the medical and the recreational is very important, and it varies from state to state. And I liked that New Frontier, they touched on some of the different states, and even Oregon, for instance, is emerging, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But they touched on how some of the like the legislative impacts would affect, like there's prices that have to be considered, all the way down to like the product level, that can have some severe impacts on operators, and that has another big impact on if you're making investment decisions in the medical or recreational space. I mean, it's data that you kind of need to know, and how those two are different from each other.
Absolutely. And the way it is regulated is we're going to see an increased difference in the two. The recreational use has some socioeconomic impact to take into consideration, and then there's how it's being taxed. We have found, at least in Colorado, there is high elasticity in demand in both recreational and medical, but significantly higher in the recreational portion of marijuana. What that means is that small price changes have large, significant impact on the demand. So that's something that we're going to continue to track. And yes, this would have some implications both in terms of how it's being taxed as well as what investors may decide to do in terms of should they invest in medical or recreational.
Awesome. I think that's a really, obviously, with the metric data being what it is, its value, I don't know that can be specifically overstated. So to have such comprehensive congregation of all that information is incredibly valuable for anybody that's looking into it. We touched on some broad topics. Let's go into a little bit more targeted ones, as Chris and I have both had an opportunity to go through all of the information. We've seen in Washington and Colorado this year that increases of cannabis supply can create very volatile product prices. Are there ways that businesses can insulate themselves and protect themselves from these sorts of swings, or do they really have to roll with the punches here?
Well, no, there's always things that can be done. And again, based on the data that we've collected and analyzed, what we see is there's an opportunity for specifically cultivators to differentiate themselves by becoming more cost efficient. You brought up the fact that yes, we have seen some volatility, and again, it's because demand elasticity is quite high. At least in Colorado, we have found it's quite high. So three things that can be done. One, become more cost efficient. Unfortunately, marijuana cultivation is one of the industry with the largest cost, energy costs that we have found. About 40% of its cost is driven by cooling or lighting involved in growing marijuana. So that's pretty significant. There are new technologies, and in fact, we are currently working on a study that is assessing new technology and technology application and how that would mitigate the high cost structure currently somewhat burdening cultivators in the space. So that's one thing, becoming more cost efficient. That said, we probably will see some lag time between adoption of new technologies because the margins, while the demand is elastic and yes, it's becoming price competitive, there's still high margins. So we expect a couple of years before we see some real adoption of new technologies in the space. The second thing is branding. I mean, you can differentiate yourself with branding, and that is something that is true of any industry, and it applies to the cannabis space as well. Other than that, specialization is something that we probably will see more and more occurring. So cultivators are now maybe are looking, are also operators, so retailers that are maybe have 60 plus strains, we'll see them narrow down their focus based on their clientele demand. And that is one of the things that we are endeavoring to collect data against so we can really help inform operators as far as what is really driving demand in their specific area. What are the medical conditions that are rising and are in higher growth? What strains are getting more traction in a given area? And believe it or not, that does differentiate quite a bit even within a state.
Awesome. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so she touched on a few really important points there in that. So like at potstocks.com, we get a lot of entrepreneurs that really want to get into the sector. Like they want to grow or they want to retail, but they don't really know where to start. And like the operator report specifically can save people so much time and money, just in terms of the discussions about pricing, discussions about strains, the discussions about branding, you can save yourself so much money with just that one little report. It made me want to go start growing or retail. So I don't know, I just can't really overstate the value of that enough.
Excellent. Well, we are going to take a short break to run an ad real quick, and we will be right back. So just give us about 30 seconds. Hello, we're here with Jason of Elevated Products and their latest innovative product, the Groove Tube. Are you tired of dealing with unwanted odor associated with cannabis use?
Hi, Eric. Thanks. The Groove Tube is a modern blow tube or spoof, and it's designed with personalized scents and customizable wraps to make for a truly unique and personal and effective way to combat unwanted odor from cannabis smoking.
You can customize your wrap, pick your scent, and order at groovetube.com. That's www.groov-tube.com today. Thank you, everyone, for waiting. We're back with Giadha DeCarcer of New Frontier Financials. Thanks for watching our ad. Giadha, states are currently experimenting with different taxation models for cannabis. We've seen policies all over the board, some of which seem more efficient than others. Do you think that any particular state, with the few that are in there right now, have gotten it right yet? And are there any amendments that you think personally would make things better?
Well, we did look at Colorado quite extensively, and one of the things that we found there is the target state level revenue we fell short. Colorado fell short of its target revenue generation, and we think that the reason that is because it was taxed too high. What happened there is that the tax structure was so high that it ended up fueling the black market, which is a danger that is going to be faced by all of the states that move into decriminalization and taxation of marijuana. In terms of states that we think have done it better, we are currently looking at Oregon. Some interesting opportunities arising from there. And we're obviously looking at other states such as California, and there will be more to come on that. But high taxation is something to keep an eye on because it does negatively impact revenue generation for any given state.
Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Because there's an interesting sublet there between the black market and the legal markets, mainly because the price is a huge factor, but there are obviously some people that are just not going to go black market for the trouble, the danger, et cetera, et cetera. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think Giada's right. For instance, there's some states that are having to amend some of their regulations right now because they've kind of finally realized this. I don't think they bought the reports, but they finally like Washington, for instance. They had like a 3-tiered tax structure, and I think they're getting rid of all their excise taxes now, and they're moving it to a flat retail tax rate, which will be a lot lower, and that is entirely to combat the black market. So yeah, I think she's 100% right.
Excellent. Okay. We've seen that some of the data on the taxation rates may be too high to compete in the black market. Giadha, does New Frontier have any recommendations in regards to the taxation rate in the legislative report?
It really does depend on the state. So
okay.
I don't want to give a rate per se because I think that would be inaccurate. The bottom line is that we have found a lot of elasticity in this industry, which means that when you raise the tax too high, what you're doing is basically just raising the price. That tax is actually being passed on to the consumer. And if the consumer's willingness and ability to buy is, as we have found, so heavily impacted by the price, then what you're gonna have people like buy less. So that's really as much as I can say at this point. But to Chris' point, Washington with their flat rate is very interesting and looks very promising. And of all the structures that we have analyzed to date, we do believe that one we're optimistic on how that's going to work out.
Excellent. As far as the medical marijuana versus the recreational markets, as you had pointed out earlier, being vertical side-by-sides there, with national recreational rollout, do you believe that the medical realm is going to remain profitable and exist as it is, or is it going to need to pivot into some other form? I guess the basis of that question being, do you believe that the medical markets are going to survive the recreational rollout?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we're still discovering medical applications for marijuana every day. Clinical trials that are currently ongoing look very promising, and pharmaceutical companies with quite deep pockets are looking into this industry. So you're going to see some serious flow of investment going into the medical side of things. And because of the success of the medical application I've had to date, I would be extremely surprised if the medical applications go anywhere other than up. Recreational, I mean, it's cannabis overall is a very interesting industry because unlike alcohol, it's not just, it has three different applications: industrial, medical, and recreational. And at this point, we don't think any of the three is going to cannibalize the other. If nothing else, it will coexist and bloom parallel one to the other. So that would be our expectation right now. And based on the data collected to date, that's what we're seeing.
Excellent. Chris, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, from the investment standpoint, I think that the medical side, there's a bit more risk there if we do think that that a nationwide recreational rollout is pending. But again, that's just speculative at this point. So I don't know that investors need to invest. I tend to look at where the market's going to be as opposed to where it's at right now. And while I think the medical market is doing it's I mean it's no contest. It's doing better than the recreational. 37 states or something right now. I think as recreational becomes more popular, I think we're going to probably see diminished investments in the medical market.
Okay. Moving on to energy efficiency, excuse me, and green tech here. This is directed at both of you. Giadha, you may have a crack at it first. How do you think the cannabis market will be affected by green and eco-friendly technologies? It's taken a while for it to really take root in traditional agricultural markets. And how do you think cannabis growers will see any sort of cost-benefit analysis and energy water saving? Specifically, not necessarily specifically, but I know that California obviously is having a huge water issue at the moment, and they are very big. I know that the marijuana market in particular was targeted by a lot of people in the state for eating up too much water, which if I remember correctly, was proven to be fallacious, but it was still a targeted thing that happened. So,
I mean, it's going to become a numbers game. Again, in order for operators, cultivators to remain competitive, they are at some point going to have to become more cost effective. And because energy consumption is such a big driver of the cost structure, they're going to have to address it sooner rather than later. In fact, we're in the process of putting together a very in-depth case study looking at new technologies, both in addressing the energy efficiency as well as the environmental impact. We are currently working with some industry leaders and academic leaders that have been looking into the carbon footprint created by the marijuana industry, specifically in Colorado and California. And we do see a need for both the operators as well as legislators to take it into account and figure out how we can continue to support the industry and sustain its growth without negatively impacting the environment.
Chris?
Yeah, and I think there's some natural synergy there. Like things like like the new Tesla Powerwall, that type of thing. I think cannabis operators tend to be a bit more on the edge naturally, and I think they're going to look for technology like this to help them in their operations. It is a matter of affordability though, and I know over the last few years it's gotten significantly more affordable for self-sustained type businesses. But I don't know that it's. I think it might be a parallel industry, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a big trend.
Okay, excellent.
We agree that adoption is going to lag.
Yeah, and just tying into that, one of the things, cost efficiency, everything that is inherently built into being a profitable company. Going along with that, as you both touched on earlier, branding is going to be a huge thing for a lot of the companies, particularly with more and more companies coming on board, being able to market themselves above the rest, being able to be different, however it is that they're going to create an edge for themselves in the market. I know that there's a lot of metric data, how important branding is in all the reports that you guys have, which is a huge thing for any potential investor, interested party that's looking to get into the industry. Is it can't be overstated how important it is to brand your product, productize yourself, and make sure that you're a part of it.
We're starting to move away from the everything has to have like a drug pun in it type branding, and I think people are starting to realize that it's making your brand scale nationally is very important in attracting investors, and I think we're actually starting to see that more and more. Things like like Dixie Elixirs or Medicine Man. Those are the type of brands that I think can scale really well. But if you have ones that are inherently localized from the get-go, I think you'll have just more trouble attracting investors.
Yep, I agree. The aesthetic's a huge thing as well, as you touched on, Chris. Just moving away from the historic view, the sort of like I guess image that we have publicly of what a marijuana user is versus what the business world is, which is drastically different and much more contemporary. So. The last question we have on our docket today, the New Frontier Investor Report showcases metric data regarding home growth and the availability of dispensaries. I found that portion particularly interesting, as these two would appear to be direct competitors, homemade versus purchased. Is this something potential investors need to worry about at all, the home growth market?
Absolutely. I think they should keep an eye on it because there is direct competition. And what we've seen is industries will adopt and regulate home growing. And then later on, we'll sort of transition out of that. And so that is something that we need to keep monitoring. And in fact, we currently have another study that's coming up online where we look at this particular issue more in depth to figure out if there really is a nationwide trend as far as investment moving away or investment opportunities arising from transition away from home growing to more commercial growing.
Chris?
Yeah, and that's just another piece of value in these reports is knowing that, because if you're going into business for yourself in an emerging cannabis market, you need to know if you're going to be able to compete with home growers in the area, or maybe you're not looking to compete with home growers. Maybe you're looking to start a hydroponic store or something like that can supplement that market, and so that's why just a little investment in something like these reports is just so critical for people starting up.
Excellent. That is actually going to do it for us for the day. I am Eric with Chris of potstocks.com. You can head to our website, www.potstocks.com. We have front page the New Frontier packet, and you can also head to mginews.com where it is currently on sale. And please head over to frontierfinancials.com to check out their excellent work. Giadha, thank you very, very much for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thank you so much. And really glad I was part of this conversation. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So everybody can head on over, generate some discussion forums on our threads for everything you've heard today. Again, go to potstocks.com, mginews.com, and frontierfinancials.com. And we will be checking in midweek. Everybody have a good day.